Welcome to True Echo, where the unheard voices rise and justice finds its echo. Today's story will shake you. It's about a father, a daughter, and a silent act of power that almost crushed everything they built. But when the truth walks in wearing a judge's robe, tables turn. Stay until the end, you won't believe how this ends. It was just after 6 in the morning when Ezekiel Turner stepped out of his weather-beaten shack on the outskirts of Pine Hollow, a town forgotten by progress and barely remembered by its own map. The sky had begun to stir with streaks of pale lavender and burnt orange. Ezekiel's breath fogged before him, but the cold didn't bother him. Not today. Today was a day 20 years in the making. His back ached, his joints cracked with each step, but his heart beat like the first time he held his daughter in his arms. Because today, that same daughter, Maya Turner, would be sworn in as Chief Judge of Grantville. He wore his best clothes. A white button-down shirt ironed the old way, on a wooden board with a stovetop heated iron. Brown slacks still holding shape despite their years. A long wool coat fraying at the sleeves, patched in places with steady, proud hands. And in his arms, clutched tighter than any wallet or suitcase, was a small canvas bag. It was ugly, old, cinched closed with a shoelace, but inside it was $5,000 in cash, saved across decades. Lawn by lawn. Roof by roof. One skipped meal at a time. He had planned to buy a phone. Maybe a new pair of shoes. But instead, he saved, for the day he could look his daughter in the eye and say, "You made it." And so did I. He arrived at the tiny train platform early, the way he always did. It was barely staffed, just an unmanned booth, a bench, and a crooked vending machine near a wall plastered with faded rail maps. The bag never left his arms. His eyes scanned corners, watched shadows, instinct born from 72 years of knowing his presence often came with assumptions. Still, he smiled to himself. In just hours, he'd see Maya in her robe. He could almost hear the gavel now. But across the platform stood two officers in pressed uniforms and poor intentions. Paul Hackett and Dean Curtis. The former was older, with a buzzed scalp and permanent scowl. The latter, young, fidgety, still half believing the badge made him someone. They spotted him like wolves watching an old stag limp into a clearing. "You see that?" Paul muttered to Dean. "Clutchin' that bag like it's full of diamonds." Dean chuckled. "Maybe it is." "No," Paul said, narrowing his eyes. "It's fear. That means he's hiding something." That was all it took. No crime. No complaint. Just suspicion twisted through the lens of a uniform worn too long without accountability. Ezekiel saw them approach. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. He just gripped his bag tighter, as if it might fly away. Paul led, with a sickly sweet tone. "Morning, sir. What's in the bag?" Ezekiel met their eyes with quiet dignity. "Some things for a trip. Ain't huttin' nobody." Dean stepped closer. "That so? Why you clutching it like your soul's inside?" "It's money. Saved it. Goin' to see my daughter. She's being sworn in as chief judge." Paul's grin widened. "You expect us to believe that?" "It's the truth." "Then you won't mind letting us take a look," Paul said, reaching without permission. Ezekiel recoiled slightly. "I'd rather not. I ain't done nothin' wrong." "Wrong answer." Paul ripped the bag from his hands, tore it open, and whistled. "Well, well. What have we here?" "That's mine," Ezekiel said, voice cracking. "All mine." Dean sneered. "This old man thinks he's got judge money." "You're under suspicion," Paul snapped. "Unreported cash, refusal to cooperate." Handcuffs clicked. Ezekiel, bound at the wrists, watched his train roll in, then roll out without him. Miles away, Maya checked her phone. No call. No message. She frowned and dialed again. Voicemail. In the precinct, Ezekiel sat in a holding room that smelled of bleach and mold. Hours passed. No phone call. No lawyer. No official charge. Just silence and humiliation. You got no right, he whispered once, his voice nearly gone. Paul didn't care. He was too busy counting Ezekiel's money aloud, bill by bill, like a prizefighter raising his fists. 5, 10, 15, must be some kind of scam, right, Dean? Dean was quieter now, doubt flickering behind his eyes. He said his daughter's a judge, he said softly. Paul waved it off. Then let her sue us. But she wouldn't need to sue. Because Maya wasn't just a judge. She was her father's daughter. And her silence was about to end. At the Grantville courthouse, Maya Turner stood tall in her robe, cameras flashing, officials smiling around her. But her eyes flicked to her phone again. Nothing. Ezekiel Turner had never missed a moment in her life. Not one. Soccer games, high school graduation, college send-off, even the day she passed the bar. Always there. Always early. And now, gone. She excused herself from the stage, nerves twisted into instinct. She called the train station. No record of Ezekiel Turner boarding. Her gut clenched. She called a contact at Internal Affairs. Within 90 minutes, she had footage from Pine Hollow's platform. There he was, her father, sitting, clutching the bag. Then 2 officers. Then cuffs. No resistance. No aggression. She froze the frame. Her voice trembled, then rose. Get me their names. Now. When she saw them, Paul Hackett and Dean Curtis, something inside her shifted. The robes came off. The daughter remained. She changed into civilian clothes, assembled a team, and drove straight to Pine Hollow. She wasn't just looking for her father. She was hunting the truth. And it was already unraveling. Maya didn't knock when she entered the Pine Hollow precinct. She didn't have to. She came in flanked by 2 officers from Internal Affairs, her badge clipped to her blazer, her voice as calm as a gavel strike. I'm looking for an elderly black man who was detained this morning. Name's Ezekiel Turner. You took him. I want to know why. The receptionist blinked. The room seemed to still. Paul Hackett was in the back office when he heard the commotion. He sauntered out, already annoyed, then saw her. You can't be in here, he said sharply. This is a police facility. I'm Chief Judge Maya Turner. And I am here for my father. The color drained from Paul's face. Dean appeared behind him, pale as paper, his eyes flicking toward the hallway like a man debating escape. Maya stepped closer. You detained my father without cause. No charges. No paperwork. No phone call. You took $5,000 in unlogged cash and locked him in a holding cell. I have the footage. I have the timeline. What I don't have, is my father. Dean cracked first. He's in holding. I can take you. Paul snapped, Curtis. But it was too late. Maya was already walking past them. The door opened, and there he was. Ezekiel Turner sat on the cold bench, slouched forward, still in cuffs, as if time had frozen around him. But when he saw her, something in him lifted. His spine straightened. His eyes, dulled by hours of humiliation, sparked. Maya, he whispered, barely believing. She dropped to her knees beside him. I'm here, Daddy. I'm so sorry it took this long. She turned to the IA officers. Get these cuffs off him. Now. As they obeyed, Paul finally spoke. He was acting suspicious. Wouldn't show ID. Had unreported cash. Maya's voice cut through him like frost. He told you his name. He told you where he was going. You ignored it because you thought his story didn't matter. But it does. He matters. And now, so will every one of your choices. Dean tried to explain, to sputter out excuses. Maya didn't even turn toward him. She only said one word, lawyer. By sunset, Paul Hackett and Dean Curtis were suspended without pay, their badges and sidearms handed over. Internal Affairs had seized the security footage, the unofficial cash drawer in Paul's back office, and the ghost report with Ezekiel's name nowhere in it. Maya and Ezekiel stepped out into the cooling evening, side by side, hand in hand. And for the first time all day, the old man smiled. "I missed the ceremony," he said, voice raspy. Maya looked at him, her eyes full of both fire and tenderness. "No, Daddy. You didn't miss anything. You made it the most important day of my life." And behind them, the precinct stood quiet, not proud, not bustling, but silent. Because for the first time in a long time, justice had walked in through the front door. That night, the city of Grantville wasn't quiet. News vans lined courthouse steps. Social media buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Footage from the train station was already online, circulating with captions like, "Judge's father detained without cause," and "Chief Judge's first act, bring down corrupt officers." Ezekiel sat on his porch, the canvas bag beside him, the same way it had sat in his arms that morning, only now, every dollar was back inside it. Neatly recounted. Not a cent missing. The old shoelace was still knotted at the top, but the fabric felt heavier now, soaked not in sweat or fear, but truth. Maya had spent the rest of the day working. She'd skipped the ceremonial luncheon. Cancelled interviews. Instead, she buried herself in drafting a complaint, a 47-page document to the state attorney general. It listed every violation: illegal detainment, abuse of authority, theft under color of law, deprivation of civil rights. She didn't just write it as a daughter. She wrote it as a judge, with the precision of someone who'd waited her whole life to speak from a position that couldn't be silenced. The next morning, Maya held a press conference. There were no celebratory speeches. No personal anecdotes. Just her voice, clear, fierce, and impossible to ignore. "My father," she said, standing behind a podium dressed in a plain black blazer, "was detained without reason, stripped of his dignity, and robbed of his hard-earned money. He was treated like a criminal for the crime of being old, black, and carrying the savings of his own labor. I want every department in this state to know, if you carry a badge and think it shields you from accountability, you're wrong. My father is not an outlier. He is proof of a system long overdue for reckoning." The silence that followed was profound. The mayor sat in the back row, arms folded, but unmoving. The city's district attorney stood, stunned, because he hadn't been briefed. Maya had sent her complaint straight to the top. Before stepping down, she added, "I am implementing a new system in Grantville today, an oversight board made of civilians. I'm requesting a statewide database to track every asset seized by law enforcement. And I won't stop there. Because justice should not depend on who your daughter is. It should depend on truth." The room didn't erupt in cheers. It didn't have to. What echoed instead was the collective realization that someone had finally drawn a line. And dared everyone to cross it. The ripple from Maya's press conference spread further than anyone expected. Within 24 hours, the governor's office released a statement supporting a review of rural police departments across the state. National news outlets picked up the story, framing it as "a daughter's justice" and "the bag that broke the badge." Civil rights attorneys began calling Maya's office. Churches and civic organizations reached out to Ezekiel, offering prayers, apologies, and sometimes just a quiet, "We saw. We know." But Ezekiel didn't want the spotlight. He just wanted his porch back. The quiet. His routine. And the peace of knowing his daughter had become everything he ever prayed she would be. Still, peace didn't come easily. At the Pine Hollow precinct, the atmosphere had turned icy. The officers who once joked in the break room now whispered nervously. No one mentioned Paul Hackett aloud, as if even his name might incriminate them. Dean Curtis sat at home, staring at the sealed envelope containing his official suspension notice. He hadn't touched his uniform since Maya left the precinct. Something inside him, whatever scraps of integrity remained, had cracked. He hadn't been the one who grabbed the bag. He hadn't ordered the cuffs. But he hadn't stopped it either. He watched it happen. He let it happen. And now, he was realizing that silence was complicity. That a badge didn't just carry the power to act, it carried the responsibility to stand against injustice. Especially when it wore the same uniform. One night, 3 days after the incident, Dean showed up on Ezekiel Turner's porch. He looked out of place, dressed in jeans and a gray hoodie, his badge nowhere in sight. His hands trembled slightly as he held out a folded piece of paper. Ezekiel didn't invite him in. But he listened. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Dean said. I didn't stop it. I should've. I've written a statement for internal affairs. Everything. What happened? What he said. What I didn't do. Ezekiel took the paper. He didn't unfold it. Didn't speak right away. Then he said, voice steady but worn. Justice ain't about apologies, son. It's about choices. You got another one comin'. Make it count. Dean nodded slowly, eyes stinging. Yes, sir. When he left, Ezekiel sat there for a long time, the paper untouched on his lap, the autumn breeze rustling through the trees. He didn't know if the boy would change. But maybe, just maybe, the system that taught him silence might begin to change too. The next morning, Maya called her father. She didn't ask about statements or scandals. She just asked if he was doing okay. He smiled as he answered. I'm all right, baby. Just thinking. About what? She asked. He chuckled softly. About how I never did like trains much anyway. The next week brought something Ezekiel hadn't expected, stillness. Not silence from fear or injustice, but real, earned stillness. The kind that settles on the shoulders after a long burden has finally been lifted. He sat on his porch each morning, same chair, same coffee mug, same view of the gravel road that cut through Pine Hollow like a scar. But now there was something different. A quiet sense of being seen. Not pitied. Not forgotten. Seen. Neighbors waved more. Some stopped to check on him, bringing peach pie or baked beans or simply their own stories, of fines they'd paid without reason, of cousins pulled over too many times, of dignity lost in shadows. And Ezekiel, though a man of few words, listened. Because now, they saw him as more than the old man with the canvas bag. He had become a witness. A reminder. A warning. Back in Grantville, Maya continued her work. The Civilian Oversight Committee became official, with a rotating board of community members, retired legal professionals, and even a few skeptics, just the way she wanted it. Transparency, she said, doesn't work without critics. She didn't gloat. Didn't seek revenge. She stayed focused. Because there were more fathers out there. More bags. More truths being quietly erased. But she did take one evening, just one, to breathe. She and Ezekiel sat beneath the stars outside his house. No cameras. No robes. Just a daughter and her father. Did I do it right, Daddy? She asked. Ezekiel didn't answer right away. He rocked slowly in his chair, eyes fixed on the treetops. You stood tall, he finally said. Even when they tried to bend you. You stood tall. That's all a father ever wants. She nodded, lips tight. I'm still angry, she said quietly. At them. At the whole damn system. You should be, he replied. But don't let it turn your heart hard. Let it sharpen your aim. Then, just before they went inside, Ezekiel pulled something from his pocket. It was the blue handkerchief he'd wrapped around the money inside that canvas bag. He handed it to her. Keep this, he said. You gave it back to me once. Now it's yours. Not just for what you saved, but for what you started. She took it with trembling hands. And in that simple exchange, more than any verdict, headline, or court order, a legacy was passed. One that wasn't written in legal briefs or sworn affidavits, but in sacrifice, and strength, and love that never quits. Sometimes justice doesn't knock, it kicks down the door when a daughter refuses to stay silent. Ezekiel Turner's story is not rare. But what made it powerful was that this time, someone with power refused to look away. The system failed. But it didn't win. Not this time. As Maya said, justice shouldn't depend on who your daughter is. It should depend on truth. If this story moved you, share it. If it made you think, leave a comment. If it made you hope, subscribe. Because here at True Echo, we don't just tell stories. We echo the truth.